Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to addiction, amongst other things. And we will have a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's a confidential free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I'd be remiss not to do a disclaimer without talking about something that has been near and dear to my heart in the last 16 to 17 months, and quite frankly, the last 11 years. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Also, a quick thanks again to everybody at the Walk MS 2022 earlier in the month over at Ridley Creek State Park in Media, Pennsylvania. It was such a wonderful time, and it was an event full of love and strength. I am thankful for them. This community is so incredible, and we are getting closer to a cure each and every day. We will continue to raise money for this in the National MS Society through a Venture to a Cure's fundraising page at rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/a venture to a cure. This fundraising effort will last through September 30th. Thank you to all of you who have gone to the National MS Society to learn more about multiple sclerosis or to even learn more about demyelination. It touches me and over the 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways. And we appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Page 85 of Alcoholics Anonymous says, we are never cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual connection. Now, what I will say is, it's more than that. It's the work we do with our therapy groups. It's the work that we do with our therapists. It's the journaling that we do. It's the meditation that we do. It's everything that we try to figure out why we walk down that road in the first place. Moreover, that adage means a lot more than just alcoholism. For me, it talks about obesity. It talks about gambling. It talks about codependency. So we are never given a cure to these things. We're given a daily reprieve based on the work that we do, but we're never cured of it. When we don't follow that, we may fall into a lapse. And if that lapse is not taken care of, it turns into a relapse. Tonight, we discuss lapses and relapses, and we'll take your questions and comments because this is the Venture Forward. Good evening once again, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, alcoholism, and compulsive gambling, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and also streaming on the rebrand.ly/adventure to a cure page, and we'll be doing that through the rest of the month. Lapses and relapses. It's something that we don't ever want to hear or ever want to experience, but chances more than not, it happens. And even in the most minimal of terms, a slip. Slips, lapses, and relapses are part of recovery. And the best thing we can do is be aware of it and come up with mechanisms that help us through those things. Basically, a defense mechanism, if you will. Tonight we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about a situation that has happened to me in the last couple of weeks that made me realize that a recovery plan is very much important. Now, fortunately, it didn't result in any sort of breaking of my abstinences, breaking of my sobrieties. But it did put everything into full focus. And it took a conversation to make me realize fully how close I am on that pendulum. So I'll tell you more about that in 2 minutes. But let's say who is in this room and who has won tonight's door prize. And that will belong to Mahas over on Awesome Wood Things over on YouTube. He says hello and waves. Hello, Matt. How are you doing this evening? Hope you're doing well. Also on YouTube, we have Ingy on the West Coast who says, hey, JV and everyone. Ingy, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Long time no see, and it's good to see you tonight for sure. We also have Austin on YouTube who says, hey, JV and everyone else. Austin, good to see you this evening as well. That conversation. So there was a particular horse race last weekend that might have happened in the state of Kentucky. We won't have to go into too many details on what that race actually is. But there was a certain level of, I guess, strategy and consideration about what would make sense as far as what would be the proper sort of betting strategy, etc. And in talking about this with someone who is fully aware of my journey, they were quite shocked about the conversation and told me to stop it. Stop it because, one, it is very much unhealthy to talk about it. I agree. 2, it was actually triggering them. And that made me realize that we are never, as we said in the open, we are never cured of the addictions that we have. We are never cured of it. Even if it is just basically a fascination on what one would do with such a race, we are never cured of it. We should never think about it that way. If you're looking at the power and prestige of such an event, that's one thing. If you're thinking about what would be the proper sort of betting mechanism, that's no bueno. Especially knowing my story, especially how much money I've lost over the years. No bueno. So that person was absolutely right. And for their privacy, we're not going to talk to who basically shared this with me or told me to slow it down or slow your roll, if you will. But they were absolutely right, and I'm much thankful for them, without a doubt. So that is the reason why we're talking about lapses and relapses. The other thing I've been noticing, just from my sort of view into the world, I think in this time of year, given what we've gone through in the last 2+ years, given the fact that we have this new sense of freedom and also these newer ways of becoming closer to breaking that sort of thing, we must very well be aware of what these mechanisms are. We must very well be aware of what our coping mechanisms are, what our relapse plans absolutely are. And we're going to talk about that tonight as well. So it's a mouthful. Also, we're going to do a couple of readings out of Language of Letting Go too, because I think there are 2 poignant passages within this past week and into next, which are very fitting for tonight's conversation, but also past that too. So let's get started. Episode 4.24 of the Venture Forward. Wow, 24 episodes in this fourth season. I cannot believe we've gone this far, and I am very much thankful of that, for sure. Today is May 12th, and we're talking about lapses and relapses. Let's start with that first language of letting go, and I think it is from the May 11th journal about perfection and this sort of ill-conceived sort of premise that we all have to be perfect. We're human beings. We're far from perfect. So let's read this. Many of us picked on ourselves unmercifully before recovery. We may also have a tendency to pick on ourselves after we begin recovery. If I was really recovering, I wouldn't be doing that again. I should be further along than I am. You know, those sort of statements. These are statements that we indulge in when we're feeling shame. We don't need to treat ourselves that way. There is no benefit. Remember, shame blocks us, but self-love and acceptance enables us to grow and change. If we truly have done something we feel guilty about, we can correct it with an amend and an attitude of self-acceptance and love. Even if we slip back to our old codependent ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, we do not need to be ashamed. We all regress from time to time. That's how we learn and grow. Relapse or recycling is an important and necessary part of recovery. And the way out of recycling is not by shaming ourselves. That leads us deeper into codependency. Much pain comes from trying to be perfect. Perfection is impossible unless we think of it in a new way. Perfection is being who and where we are today. It's accepting and loving ourselves just as we are. We are each right where we need to be in our recovery. Today, I will love and accept myself for who I am and where I am in my recovery process. I am right where I need to be to get to where I'm going tomorrow. And that's the language of letting go. Let's think about that for a second. Perfection, or the sort of barometer reading we use for perfection, has been wrong all this time. I think we're doing the right thing by showing up and learning and showing up and growing. There is no measurement that talks to that. If you've learned something, you're winning. If you're growing, you're winning. That, in the guise of that passage, is perfection. So we can't be too hard on ourselves. If we are too hard on ourselves for something we have a very infinitesimal chance of ever reaching, that might be something that can be a stressor. And we don't need stressors in this life. We observe them. We observe what's going on. But we should never be stressed by them for sure. One thing, as I talked to in the open, was a passage in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I actually want to bring that page up real quick. Page 85 says the following. It is easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a DLA reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, as I said in the open. Every day is a day where we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will or not be done. Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God-conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Now, what I will say is this as I go back to Maine. As I've stated all along this series, for me, God means greatest orderly direction. It does not necessarily mean some sort of Judeo-Christian God. It means a sense with your universe, a sense with your community. So think about it with that lens for a second. Think about that sort of interconnectedness you need to the people around you and to the people in this world. That is what that passage is about. And as far as the 11th step, as I bring back the graphic, the 11th step says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying for only knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. What that means is getting a better understanding of the universe, getting a better understanding of what the universal construct is for us, and becoming one with that. Because when you have that universal construct in you, you become a better member of society. You become a better member of humanity. Taking that sort of Judeo-Christian construct out for a second, that's what it means from a spiritual sense. Now, if you are Judeo-Christian in belief, absolutely go down that road and think about it in a Jesus-minded mindset or a Quran-minded, Allah-minded mindset or what have you, right? But from a universal sort of perspective, it talks about grace, generosity, kindness, love, and wisdom across humanity. That's what we talk about that in this program, greatest orderly direction. We had someone just join us during that. It is Brad over on YouTube who says, woo, I finally figured out the timeline. Ha. Brad, good to see you this evening. So we've talked about slips, lapses, and relapse as the name of this episode. It would behoove us to talk about exactly what we're talking about with those definitions. A minor event that can be deemed accidental in nature is a slip. NIH looks at the initial transgression of problem behavior after a quit attempt as a lapse, which could eventually lead to continued discretions to a level that is similar to the level that was there before quitting, and at that point, that is defined as a relapse. However, one thing that we are not necessarily talking about in this program, but something that is very much possible. Another possible outcome of a lapse is that the client or person or whoever may manage to abstain and thus continue to go forward in the path of positive change. In that case, that is deemed a prolapse. They didn't go backward and regress into a relapse. They actually ended up better into a prolapse. They realized how much of a bottom that is, and they're living the cleanest life they possibly can. It is very rare. That's why we don't normally talk about that in this program, but prolapses are very much a thing, and that is from the National Institute of Health, that previous item. What do we need to know? That's a very large question, isn't it? You know, it goes back to, I'm going to go back to Maine for a second. It goes back to how do we deal with our coping mechanisms? We are thrown a lot of curveballs in this life. No matter what sort of field of work you're in, no matter what your family contingent is, no matter what situations you're in, we are thrown a lot of curveballs. You throw in a global health emergency, that's another curveball. You throw in, there are many curveballs that are basically thrown at us. And it's on us to figure out what's the best way to get through that. What is the best way to make sure our head is on straight and we're doing the best thing we possibly can? Airplane mask use analogy or adage use for the 109th time. When the cabin pressure goes out and the airplane mask comes down from the ceiling, the first person you have to cover is yourself, and then you worry about the rest of the row. Because your love, your strength, your wisdom, and your care starts inside first. Then you take care of everybody else. But you have to get that centered first. This is yet another reason why, right? So, what we need to know is this. What are the high-risk situations that we find ourselves in that may cause a slip, a lapse, or a relapse? Being very situationally aware and being very fully aware of that. It's not wrong to say, hey, I was in this high risk situation for a second, whether it be a party, whether it be this, whether it be that. You know your high risk situations. You feel different parts of yourself now gearing up that should be pretty much muted, or at least observing the situation and not absorbing the situation. What are our coping mechanisms, and what does our support chain look like? Who do we call? Who is in our 3 people that we call when we're having an issue, when we are having a problem where we're looking like we are teetering? Who do we call? And how effective is our self-efficacy? What is our motivation? What is our behavior? What is our social environment? It basically goes to 4 key areas. What is our performance outcomes? What is our vicarious experiences that we gravitate to, saying, I want to be like that in a most clean and healthy sort of way? What is the sort of verbal persuasion that I have, that sort of good, sort of natured back and forth that I might get, whether it's verbal or nonverbal? And what is the physiological feedback to that? What is that sort of acceptance to a positive situation that makes me feel comfortable and okay in a non-high risk situation? You combine all 4 of those realms together, that's your self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy, more times than not, is very paramount in trying to get yourself through a high-risk situation or avoiding high-risk situations en masse. Going back to me for a second. Brad writes, love you, brother. Glad I caught it and not waited until 8 p.m. Haha. Glad you're here, Brad, for sure. So the 4 keys to the lack of self-efficacy: performance outcomes, vicarious experiences, verbal persuasion, physiological feedback. The 4 key paradigm, the 4 key analogy is provided by Simply Psychology. And the 3 things that we need to know is from Recovery Answers. Thank you very much to both of those fine organizations in helping me out with that. Slips are common. We go back to the National Institute of Health for this one. They talked to a study of over 500 alcoholism outcome studies and reported that more than 75% of the subjects relapsed within 1 year of treatment. The actual link to that study is down the bottom. Lapses happen. The question ends up being, does the lapse continue to regular repeatance that the lapse becomes a relapse? And you'll know what that relapse is. If you're finding yourself in a world that was equal to the world that you were previously living before you started treatment, before you started sobriety, that's a relapse. It goes on to say that a study published by colleagues demonstrated that nicotine, heroin, and alcohol produce highly similar rates of relapse over a 1 year period. Very dramatic number, 80 to 95%. A significant proportion of patients, 40 to 80%, receiving treatment for alcohol use disorders had at least 1 drink, as we call a lapse. What I will say is a slip is 1 drink, or an accidental drink. A lapse would be, I'm going to be having this drink. It'll be that one time. It is indeed a lapse. Within the first year of each treatment, or first year of after treatment, whereas around 20% of patients return to pre-treatment levels of alcohol use. So 1 in 5. 1 in 5 go back to, basically where they were before treatment. So it's pretty much a relapse. And we're talking about something called relapse prevention in all of this. So coming up with a recovery plan, coming up with these sort of things that you need to keep in mind. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it's a strategy that reduces the likelihood and severity of relapse following the cessation of reduction of problematic behavior. So reducing the problematic behaviors first and foremost. Cessation, very much important first and foremost. So you have to be aware of these things. And then from there you start working it without question. I'm going back to Maine for a second. Brad says, if the lapse causes so much guilt, you can't win. Don't feel guilt. Move on and go forward. He continues to say, you messed up, fix it and move on. Absolutely. There's no such thing as perfection. That's why we talked about that in the open. And we have to be fair to ourselves. And as we've talked about before, and we'll talk about a couple more times in this episode, lapses are part of this. Lapses and relapses are part of recovery. And of course, we want to avoid it. But we have to be cognizant that the risk is always there. And if it does, it doesn't mean we failed. If we stay in the world of the relapse and have no desire to get out of it, no way to fix it, then we have to find another mechanism to get out of it. But there's no failure there. Recognizing it is very much important. So let's talk about this relapse prevention plan. 4 key things here. First piece of this is, what things do you like to do? What skills do you like to take part in that will keep your mind away from the addiction? Do you like to play golf? Do you like to go fishing? Do you like to go for a long bike ride? Do you like to read a book? Anything. What are the sort of mechanisms that will keep your mind away from the addiction? What will keep your mind away from overeating? What will keep your mind away from drinking? What will keep your mind away from gambling? That's the first thing. For me, I find that live streaming has helped me more times than not, funny enough. I think telling my story has helped me more times than not. Getting to know all of you has helped me more times than not. And there's a series of other habits and skills that I've picked up over the last 2.5, 3 years. My exercise, my physical fitness has become very much important. One would say if I overdid it, it would become a firefighter. So if I can manage it real well, then it's not acting like a firefighter. It is providing the proper sort of nurturing for the gap that was previously there. It also helps if I could talk straight, right? The second piece is something we talked about before. Who are the 3 people you can talk to if you're thinking about partaking or using? Getting that list. Now, if you're part of a recovery group, more times than not, you have your list of 3, you have your list of 5, and you know you have people you can talk to if you need to. That's very important. Knowing who you can turn to when you're feeling that sort of drive, that sort of temptation, is very powerful. And knowing that you can get the help that you can to be talked off of it. Outside of going to meetings, outside of journaling, outside of talking to your therapist. The third thing is definitely putting, meat and potatoes to this. And actually answering this question. What are the consequences of partaking or using? So think about these 2 questions, right? What is the outcome of the relapse? So what is that first piece? And then second is, and the flip of that would be, what is the outcome or outcoming of sobriety? So if you remain abstinent, if you remain sober, what is the outcome of that? What is the benevolent sort of effect of that? Make sure you understand that. Make sure that's part of your plan. Know full well what the good is for you not to do it, because it's very important to recognize that. There's a few things to realize. And if you're watching this on a mobile phone, I'm sorry for the way the size of the font's appearing. But think about this. 1, these cravings do end up passing. Distracting yourself and moving to safer ground is key, right? So if you're at a party and you're feeling that sort of temptation, the best thing you can do is move yourself to higher ground, right? So don't put yourself in a situation or an environment that would make you feel compelled to perhaps have a drink or whatever the addiction is. Next piece is very important. Complacency does not work here, right? You have to be very directive in what you're trying to do, and you're not going to pass down on this. You're not going to pass down on your sobriety. You're not going to pass down on the recovery you've made. Complacency does not play here. It does not. Very important to realize that. Your life, your health, you are worth it. You are most important. Complacency does not satisfy that. You know that. I know that. 3, avoid the situations that put you into these risks. So it's basically an extension of that. If you know that there's going to be a chance of these sort of things that are going to go on, that are going to make you feel like, That sort of activity sounds good, or that drink sounds fantastic. That sort of thing, don't be there. There'll come a point in your life where you realize, okay, I know I can be there and not feel one egging of that. But know yourself, right? Be honest with yourself. Be transparent with yourself. 4, the risky situations will tell the tale on whether you lapse or relapse. And that means that the actual lapse or relapse may not happen right then and there, right? The risky situations that you find yourself in and what you are feeling at the time, the thought processes that happen at that time, will tell the tale well before the actual use takes place. If you feel those sort of thoughts coming, if you feel those sort of feelings coming, the best thing you can do is remove yourself from that situation and go, as I said before, to safer ground. That's the most important thing you could do. But most importantly, as I said about 3 minutes ago, relapse is not a failure, okay? I feel like I need to go to main to relapse is not a failure. Not at all, right? Falling back due to a slip, to relapse, only makes the situation worse. But it's not a failure. It's not a failure if you end up healthier and moving forward from it. So relapse is not a failure. It's not. Not doing anything about it would be closer to, I would say, a failure. But even then, you're alive, you're well, you're taking care of yourself, you realize it's an issue. That's steps in the positive direction, far from a failure at all. So remember that. We talk about ourselves being so hard on ourselves, right? We talk about this idea of perfection. We're human beings. We're far from perfect beings, right? We have nuances about ourselves. We have things that might be wrong, and that's okay. That's what makes us who we are. It's our ability to learn. It's our ability to grow from these things. That's what makes us the powerful human beings that we are. That's what makes us the truly incredible human beings that we are. And I know that for a fact because we can manifest anything. And I know all of you are incredible and you can manifest that. And I've seen many of you manifest it each and every day. So I'm very thankful for that. That's what a prevention plan looks like. It's simple, but you need to have it somewhere. And you need to always have it updated. Because as the human experience continues, these things may change with respect to how you answer those questions. But as long as you're being honest with yourself and you're taking care of yourself, that's the best you can do. And those 4 guidelines were provided by Therapist Aid. And thank you, Therapist Aid, for doing that. We wouldn't have this conversation without a flowchart, right? You're in a high-risk situation. 2 things can happen. You can either have an effective coping response that increases your self-efficacy, that decreases your chance of relapse, or you have an ineffective coping response. You stay at that party, per se, and then your self-efficacy becomes decreased. You have a positive outcome expectation. You're actually downplaying it. You're becoming complacent to what that situation may be. And then it ends up going to a increased probability of relapse, as you can see there. The thing is, we can't be complacent. Not at all. If there is a risk of us ever using or ever drinking or ever whatnot, we have to be very fully aware and remove ourselves from that situation if we are feeling that sort of thing. It is very fair, very loving, and very caring for us to do that. Reality is this. If that conversation about the Derby took place a year ago, I would not be in a good place right now. I would say a year and a half ago. I think where I have really fought through this and really have developed a recovery plan and really understand what's going on here, that has been the most important thing. But that also goes back to the work that I'm doing as well. Going to therapy, journaling every day, meditating, being very much in touch with myself. That work is very much important. Let's see. Brad says, meeting other people who are quote unquote nowhere near as bad as me, but are just as bad makes my life okay every day. Well, and he goes on to say, because no one is as bad as me, but they all are. finding anyone that you can share that sort of commentary with, sharing that sort of feeling, that sort of honesty, that sort of transparency is the best thing you can do, Brad. I'm very thankful you share that with me, and I'm very thankful to share that with you, as I am for all of you. Transparency and honesty is very much a very important thing here. We have to be real with ourselves. And when we're real with ourselves, the others that are in this group, the others that are in this community, become real with us too. So then that leads me to this next question. We talked about this sort of flow chart, which I thought we only saved the flow chart for Matt's episodes. Just kidding, Matt. Your flow chart was fantastic. Basically 10 things you can do to how to avoid the slip, right? This is important. Get a sponsor. Get a sponsor. Basically have someone that's going to be there that keeps you accountable for how you are with your recovery. That's really important. 2, attend meetings regularly. It doesn't have to be the 12 steps per se. It could be Smart Recovery. It could be any sort of recovery group. But attend those meetings regularly. Get the viewpoints of others. Grow yourself that way. Speak with other program members regularly, as Brad was equating to before. That sort of back and forth is very much important in this story. 4, avoid temptation, much akin to what we were talking about in the last 5-10 minutes. 5, be intentional about developing your community and your spirituality. Become one with your community. Become one with religion. If you want to go back to the church, go back to the church. Whether you're UU or Christian or Buddhist or Islamist, whatever the religion is, right? Seventh-day Adventist, whatever. Wiccan. Again, they all believe in the same constructs. So become one with that spirituality. Become closer to your universalism. Become one with the universe. 6, work the steps and the mechanisms. I say mechanisms because we talk about something like Smart Recovery, and it's not necessarily the 12 steps as prescribed by Bill W. But there are mechanisms within Smart Recovery too that we have to be very cognizant of. 7, service. Giving back to the community. Giving back to one another. When we do that, we become better connected, the more likely that we're not going to go back to those steps. Go back to that world where we were drinking or overeating or whatnot. Service is very much important. 8, be recovery focused, not prohibition focused. So celebrate your recovery. Don't celebrate the fact that, I just stayed away from this for a set period of time. Recovery is a lifestyle. Be cognizant of that. Live that, right? It's part of who you are. 9, learn from those who are in this boat, especially for a long time. We call them the old timers. I refuse to use that sort of language in this slide, but those that have, those that have been meeting makers for a long time, because meeting makers make it, have a lot to say. They are very wise. You should listen to them. And 10, as we said before, recognize the following. No one is immune from a slip. Slipping, lapsing, is not a failure. No one's immune from that. Get that idea of perfection out for a second. Just be true to yourself. That's the best thing you can be. I think about some of the people in this group. I think with Recovering Addict, don't mean to call him out by name, but I look at someone like Des. Des has done the show before too. And thank you again, Des, for doing that show back in season 1. But Des has a lot of stories to tell and a lot of things he's learned over the years. And he's an incredible person to talk to, especially when you're at that sort of teeter-tottering point when you don't know what end is up and you want to get a better sense of what you're feeling and you want to move away from the cravings of the addiction. He is definitely a good person to talk to. A lot of the people in these groups are good people to talk to. That's why you come up with a list of 3 to 5, right? But Des, shout out to you. You're definitely one of those people as well. A few more things to think about. Explore new hobbies. Reconnect with old ones, right? become part of the things that you were really good at one time or want to learn. It could be playing an instrument. It could be going for, traveling the world. It could be going for hikes. It could be doing the most simplest or the most complex of things. But you have the freedom to do that. So go ahead and explore that. That's definitely better than the world you came from. So definitely do that. Another thing would be make use of a journal and use it. It is by you, for you. The only person that sees my day one journal on the most part is me. Sometimes I'll share a poem that I wrote in day one for all of you. Sometimes I'll share it with a couple of other people. But most of the entries that are in that book is only for me. But it also allows me to be transparent and for me to observe and be adamant about what I've observed. So the journaling process is very much an important thing in all of this. 3, get your body moving, because as you exercise the body, you have exercised your mind. The mind-body connection is very much a powerful thing. So the more you move your mind, the more you can, funny enough, be on a treadmill or an elliptical machine and have thoughts and have those moments of observation. It's happened to me more times than not. And it's amazing what you think about when you're exercising. So, get moving, right? Get the body moving. You exercise the body, you have exercised the mind. And 4th, and something we've talked about before, do not be afraid to ask for help, especially in these recovery groups, in these communities. These are people that are here to help you. So don't be afraid. The only person you're defeating by not asking for help is yourself. So don't be afraid to ask for that help. Which gets me to the last language of letting go for this episode. Honesty. In the beginning, we talked about perfection and how much perfection can be a fallacy if we don't define perfection the right way. Let's talk about honesty. Step 5 of Al-Anon says, admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Basically, what our wrongs exactly were, admitted that to another human being, and admitted that to God and ourselves. Talking openly and honestly to another person about ourselves in an attitude that reflects self-responsibility is critical to recovery. It's important to admit what we have done wrong to others and to ourselves. It's very important. Verbalize our beliefs and our behaviors. Get our resentments and fears out in the open. That's how we release our pain. That's how we release old beliefs and feelings. That's how we are set free. The clearer and more specific we can be with our higher power, ourselves, and another person, well, that's something where we really think about how quickly and how fast we can go down the path of being free. And it took me a while to say that, but if you think about it, freedom can quickly be obtained with that transparency. Without it, there are barriers in our way. So think about that. The clearer and more specific we can be with our higher power, ourselves and another person, the more quickly we will experience that freedom. Step 5 is an important part of the recovery process. For those of us who have learned to keep secrets from others and ourselves, it is not just a step, it is a leap towards being healthy. I'm going to go to Maine for a second. I don't usually do this in the middle of a reading, but I got to talk about this. Do you have people that are near to you that are all about keeping secrets or asking you to keep secrets from others? And do you realize how much that is a codependent ask? Whether it's for them or it's for you or it's for both of you. It's no bueno, right? To come up with even the whitest of lies is not a good thing to do. It is blocking you from the recovery you deserve. I'll repeat that. For those of us who have learned to keep secrets from others and ourselves, it is not just a step, it is a leap towards becoming healthy. The more transparent we are, the better we are. Today, I will remember that it's okay to talk about the issues that bother me. It is by sharing my issues that I will grow beyond them. I will also remember that it's okay to be selective about those in whom I confide. I can trust my instincts and choose someone who will not use my disclosures against me and who will give me healthy feedback. That is the language of letting go. Think about the people that are around you that put you in that sort of situations and have a long, honest-to-God conversation with first yourself and figure out what sort of utility they're fitting right now. If they need a conversation, have that conversation. If they're not going to take well to that conversation, be aware of that too. Your recovery starts with you. Not only the recovery from alcoholism or overeating or gambling, your recovery from codependency, your recovery from co-addiction starts with you too. So realize that. Okay? It's very important. A mouthful because as I think about the stories that I've lived through in this life, I know how adamant that is. And I'm trying more and more to be as open, honest, and transparent as humanly possible. There was a time in this life where I wasn't. There was a time in this life where others told me not to be. That doesn't play anymore. And it shouldn't play for you either. Let's talk about what's coming up. Tomorrow, we do what we do best here. We have a conversation about anything and everything on VF Talks tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. It is the day of the week I look forward to, mainly because of the good times we have on Friday nights. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, Friday night, 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. Next week, 2 items. 1 item is to be determined. Have some concepts ready for Tuesday. We'll know more when I do. I'll let you guys know on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And also Twitter. And then 1 week from tonight, I'm not necessarily going to re-air an old episode, but I'm going to add additional footage to that old episode. Next Thursday is my father's birthday. And I want to talk about my dad by re-airing elements of the episode I did last year in talking about what my dad means to me and also the lessons I learned from my dad, both good and bad. But also what the story means now, given how much I've done in the last year and me fighting through multiple sclerosis and trying to make this life better for myself. So we're going to, in a way, re-air that episode, but we're going to add new elements to that show. So it might be very much pre-recorded next Thursday, but you'll see next Thursday, which will be May 19th. And then next Friday will be another VF Talks. So that's the schedule. Friday, VF Talks. Tuesday, topic to be determined. And then next Thursday, a conversation about my dad. A couple more comments. One more comment. It's Awesome Wood Things that says, hey, I know that Matt Haas guy. Haha. I know that Matt Haas guy too. He's an incredible guy. He's like a brother to me, and I love him. So thank you, Matt. I'm looking forward to having a great episode of VF Talks with you tomorrow night. But until next time, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward in VF Talks. Stay safe. Stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific for VF Talks. Take care of yourselves. I love you all, and fly, be free.